Hey, we're here, another episode of the Rock Fantasy Files. And as we combine two epic albums in a roundtable discussion tonight, that were both celebrating 50th anniversaries in the year of 2021. The iconic Led Zeppelin 4 and the groundbreaking, some people call it groundbreaking. They say that Black Sabbath's first album was groundbreaking too, which it was. But Black Sabbath's Master Reality, which kind of really brought on a little bit of a different sound to the band. I've asked my guests tonight to pick a couple of their favorite songs, like three, and give a from each album, and give each album kind of a rating. I mean, to me, it's hard not to give both of these probably to the top of the line. But a little bit about this. I guess you had to be alive in the 70s. We're going to talk about Led Zeppelin's album first tonight. So if you don't want to listen about Zeppelin, you can fast forward a little bit. So, but we're going to talk about Zeppelin first. And I guess you had to be alive in the 70s, as I was, to realize the power of Led Zeppelin. They were like a magical band to me back then, flying around in their own jet. Of course, a lot of people had that poster, or they still have that print of them standing in front of their giant jet with this Led Zeppelin on the side. And I can remember kids in high school, and they had that. And I remember in high school, like the clique of kids that were Zepp heads. And they were like the cool stoner kids, but they always had like good-looking girls that hung out with them, and it was like this different clique. And it was definitely the band you would put on when you finally got to hang out with a girl that you liked or something. And you brought her to the house or went out in your souped-up car or something, and you don't have to put on some Led Zeppelin 4, and you get a little marijuana and steal some alcohol from your parents' cabinet, or somehow get somebody to buy you some beer. Because, of course, we weren't old enough to do that back then. Of course, the drinking age was 18, but that was just my little ideas on Zepp. And Black Sabbath also had a clique in school, but it was, of course, if you look back, they were much more underground than Led Zeppelin when these albums came out back then. And my buddies who were into Sabbath were more like greasers and guys that had like souped up cars driving around, and we would like skip school and listen to Black Sabbath and Deep Purple all day while scrunching up money to get, like, instead of buying lunch, we'd scrunch up money to see how many 6-packs of beer we could get. And I guess all the glorious 1970s. I'm being reminiscing here because I really wish I had a time machine right now to get out of this 2020, 2021 shit that we're living in. But so we're going to talk about the Led Zeppelin album first today, the untitled fourth studio album by the English rock band Led Zeppelin, commonly known as Led Zeppelin 4, was released on November 8th, 1971 by Atlantic Records. It was produced by guitarist Jimmy Page and recorded between December 1970 and February 1971, mostly in the country house Headley Grange. The album is notable for featuring Stairway to Heaven, which has been described as the band's signature song. The informal setting at the Headley Grange inspired the band and allowed them to try different arrangements of material and create songs in a variety of styles. After the band's previous album, Led Zeppelin 3, had received lukewarm reviews from critics, they decided their fourth album would officially be untitled and would be represented instead by 4 symbols chosen by each band member, without featuring the name or any other details on the cover, unlike the prior two albums. The band was joined by some guest musicians, such as vocalist Sandy Denny on the Battle of Evermore and pianist Ian Stewart on Rock and Roll. With the prior albums, most of the material was written by the band, though there was one cover song, a hard rock reinterpretation of the Memphis Minnie blues song, When the Levee Breaks. The album was a commercial and critical success, and is Led Zeppelin's best-selling, shipping over 37 million copies worldwide. It's one of the best-selling albums in the U.S., while critics have regularly placed it highly on the list of the greatest albums of all time. Of course, it starts off with the 1-2 punch of Black Door and Rock and Roll, where if you like a classic rock or a rock and roll fan, you know these songs, and you might even be sick of them from the radio play that they've got over the years. And of course, as we mentioned before, the epic Stairway to Heaven. So tonight's guest on the show, we have Count Ralphus up in my left side, and he is our heavy metal historian, at least local here in the Hudson Valley. I got Mr. Tony Dio from the South. We got John McAtee from the Mighty Incantation. I'm glad you guys could all join us tonight and sit around and talk about two great albums that are both celebrating their, can you believe, 50th anniversary? You know, so
Crazy.
I guess we can start off. Who would? I'm going to go with Ralph first, since he's up on the top square here with me.
All right.
Welcome.
Thanks for. Yeah, I only had a couple of days of notice for this show, and I'm thinking, that's the easy one. Both
Yeah.
classic albums. Love both of them. But then when I start thinking, damn, I got to pick the three best songs from it. That's when it got hard. Both albums, it's the same thing. They both have 8 tracks, but Sabbath has like the Orchid and the Embryo, but they're not like real full songs. But so yeah, first I go off. I have to pick for number 3 is Battle of Evermore. It's such a unique sounding song with the mandolin playing and the guest vocals by Sandy Denny. Then second, I have to say Stairway to Heaven. I mean, it's such an epic song. It's the most played out song of all time, but I mean, how great a song. There's a reason why it's where it is. And my number 1 on the album, I have to go with the most upbeat song on the album, Rock and Roll. Every time it comes on, it's such a great rocking album, and it's got such a great flow to it. The whole album does. There's not a bad song on the album. For classic rock, I give it a 10. I mean, it's almost like a perfect album for back, and especially when you think of 50 years old, it's unbelievable. It's such a great album.
Sure, for sure. And like I said, if you go if the 4 of us and our viewers were able to go into a time machine right now and go back to the 70s, like you think now, like the top artists are mostly pop stars and hip hop or rap or pop or whatever right now. Back then, these bands were on top of the charts. It wasn't just us underground metalheads listening to rock music. This was, everybody in school was listening to Zeppelin or whatever back then. So something to explain to some of the younger kids that are out there.
On 8-track.
On 8 tracks, and that's what I listened to. Yes, I had 8 tracks. Well, I had records too back then. I had records, and I had 8 tracks. And other than that, the only way you're listening to this stuff was on a radio. Because there was no internet, there was nothing like that to pick up any of this stuff. So yeah, you couldn't watch a concert. If you went to a concert, you went and saw it, but there was no VHS tapes. There was nothing. So, but it was a fun time, the 70s. But no. So Ralph, you're done with the Zeppelin portion, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. So we'll move over to Mr. McEntee.
Hey,
Welcome.
What's up? It's great to be here. Yeah.
Great to have you.
Yeah, I mean, Zeppelin was something I heard in my household all the time. And my brother was a big Zepp head before he became a deadhead, unfortunately.
Oh, okay.
But he would always be playing his early albums, or I mean, I don't know. Really the first time I remember focusing in on Zeppelin was probably around the Song Remains the Same album, which starts off with Rock and Roll.
Mhm.
So that song's always really stuck with me as one of my favorites. I definitely have to pick that one as one of my favorites. I mean, the live version's great, but I mean, on the album, it's just a really great rock and roll song. And if I put myself back into, 6 or 7-year-old me, hearing that was like really heavy, I mean, really, I mean, yeah, now it sounds, like normal rock music may be heavy, but at that time, in that time of my life, it's like, I basically knew that, and like, Kiss was pretty much like the 2 bands that I kind of knew. And I might have even known Zeppelin earlier because my brother was into Zeppelin. And I mean, he liked Kiss too, but I used to hear Zeppelin stuff all the time. And just relating Zeppelin to myself too is when I was in junior high school, and especially high school. I mean, I think it was like a high school thing. I mean, I was in high school in the mid 80s. So would it be like I graduated in 88, so 84 to 88, it was like people were still like really into Zeppelin. I mean, maybe it wasn't like the number one popular thing, but there was definitely a huge group of like it was like the stoners we used to call them,
Yeah.
at that
Yeah.
time. And they basically, to hang out inside of the school, smoke cigarettes, and that have their denims on and stuff like that. It was like the stoners and the hippies kind of hung out. I was not necessarily either one, but I was a metalhead, but they were the closest thing to something I could relate to,
Yeah.
and I mean, at that time, I wasn't really listening to a lot of Zeppelin at that time. It just wasn't, I was more into metal, but the impact that they had, it was just crazy because, they broke up, what, 4 or 5 years before, I even went to high school, and they were still super popular in, high school. And I remember seeing, those Swan Song shirts and just all that stuff all the time in high school, like I said, in the mid 80s. So, I mean, you still see it to this day too. I don't think it's, the same necessarily. I don't think you still have the people smoking on side of buildings, or whatever with that. But
Now they're vaping.
anyway,
Now
but
they're vaping on the side.
yeah, I guess they're vaping, listening to EDM or something,
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, I mean, there's no doubt the importance. I mean, anybody that knows rock music knows how important Led Zeppelin is. Um, you know, a lot of this album is played out pretty hardcore on radio, like
Oh yes.
especially it's even worse now. I think that like the big the big companies bought most of the radio stations. It's like they seem to play like almost every song off this album, like, you know, every day. It's like, sometimes like when I was working at some of my normal 9 to 5 jobs and they have local radio on, you'd hear almost this whole album just throughout the day, with a few others thrown in. So it's actually, you know, really kind of played out for me, even though I do like the album and I think the album is great. But for me, I'd prefer to listen to something off the first album. That's personally my favorite. But like I said, if I have to pick three, I have to go with kind of the rock and heavier ones. I mean, the other songs are great, the mellower ones, but you know if I'm gonna put on Zeppelin and I'm not going out on a date or anything, I don't think I want to put on Stairway to Heaven or some of these other ones on there. I'd rather I mean, I really like it when they rock out, like Black Dog. I guess would be maybe another pick of the three, and then I do think When the Levee Breaks is a really great
Yes.
version of that song. I mean, the drums are just so heavy in that song, and it just works. It just certain songs work with harmonica, and that one works with harmonica, and just it just has, unless it's guitar, I don't even know if that is, but it has like that sound where I think it might even be guitar that makes sound like harmonica. I don't know what the hell it is, but I think
Harmonica, and he's got special effects on it, and they played it, some of it in reverse, and it's like echoes on it.
I knew something was weird with it. Like it wasn't like regular harmonica or something, but super cool. But it's a great song. I mean, it's just super.
Drums like just pound, like you were saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like, the essence of John Bottom's drum playing there. That song was one of his, finest moments as far as really getting that vibe. And the thing that I think is interesting about just Led Zeppelin in general is that their heaviness a lot of times comes from the drums more than it comes from the guitar. I mean, guitars are heavy, but the drums just really give it that like
He's a monster.
Yeah, it gives it that extra ballsy sound. It's like it's an amazing. I mean, just the whole lineup is just amazing. I mean, Robert Plant's vocals are amazing. John Paul. I mean, they're all phenomenal. It's they're such a great band in general, just because they're all super talented, but really nobody 100% steals a show or like takes away from it. With all the talent that all these guys have, they all know when to just let what they can contribute into the song. And I think that really makes for amazing musicians and players to know, just, instead of raging the whole time in the song on all your parts, or showing off all the time. I just think that the writing is just masterful, where they just know where to do it. And this album is a perfect example. I mean, it's really, it's a classic album. I mean, yeah, it's one of the best in rock history. I mean, I you know I would have it low on the list because I'm more of a metal guy. But if I'm talking about rock and roll stuff, it's pretty damn high as far as a classic album. I mean, if I had to pick a number, let me think. If I had to pick a number, I'd give it. I mean, comparing it to other Led Zeppelin albums, I'm rating it. I'd have to give it maybe a 7 or 8. Maybe. I go with an 8. Yeah, I go with an 8 probably. And if I don't know if I'm supposed to rate it towards the Black Sabbath album.
No, we're kind of, I'm not really comparing both, but yeah, you give it an 8 on this one. We're not really, but yeah, we're just kind of. I don't want to make it like a battle of the two albums, but I guess I kind of do when I combine the episode.
Well, it's just difficult because both albums are great in their own way. They're not really comparable almost.
No,
because even
other
though
than they're from
both
71.
70s at the same time they came out, they're so drastic. There's the reason why each album is great is like almost opposite.
Well, you got to remember in the 70s, almost everybody sounded completely different. As soon as like, an album came on or a band came on the radio, you was like, oh yeah, that's Yes. Or oh yeah, that's Sabbath. Oh yeah, that's the Who. Like everything back then really sounds so much different,
Yeah, you could definitely tell when Led Zeppelin was, even if you didn't know the song, you could just, as soon as you heard the guitar, the way the guitar was played, even if you didn't know, I mean, I didn't know guitar at that age, but after I knew Led Zeppelin existed, it was pretty easy to tell when Led Zeppelin's on. It's very distinctive, even though their music's so diverse. It's pretty awesome.
Cool. All right. So we'll move over to Mr. Dio. If John, you're kind of finished, you gave us our numbers, and we'll move over to him and pop back to me. And
hey guys, always good to be here.
Thanks for
Led Zeppelin 4. Led Zeppelin 4 was the first Led Zeppelin record that I got when I was, really getting into a lot of different stuff, especially into more hard rock and metal after, we talked about the Kiss thing on a different show, being into Kiss and stuff, and then getting into other bands. But it was early 80s before I really discovered Led Zeppelin. I think went on a field trip once, and we were able to bring a boom box on the bus, and had some tapes going around, and guy loaned me Led Zeppelin 4 and Van Halen 2 that day on cassette, and I ended up trading him something for them later on, so I got to keep them. And I know when I started buying more records and stuff too, around that same period, Led Zeppelin 4 was one of the first ones I bought on LP. So it's a great album. I rate it 4. Is my number 4 Led Zeppelin record down the line of which ones I like the most. But it's a great album. It's got all the good songs on it. Probably my least favorite song might be Four Sticks.
Really?
Yeah, I just never really got that one too much. Now I recall when I first heard it back as a in my early teens. It didn't really grab me that much at first because it was a lot of mellow stuff on it. I knew Stairway to Heaven but I think Rock and Roll and Black Dog were definitely my favorite tracks. I did not get Battle of Evermore at the time. I love it now. I think it's a great song now. And so I'm going to pick that as my number 3. Battle of Evermore.
Okay.
I love the whole Renaissance type music that it is with the mandolin and all, and the Sandy Denny backing vocals and so forth. It's just a brilliant song. It's almost, you can almost I mean, if they'd ever like made music videos back in those days, that would have been a really, really cool video, I think.
Sure.
And from there, my second one that I'll go with is it's kind of a tie-up between rock and roll and Stairway to Heaven, but I've got to go with Stairway to Heaven because I listened to it this morning in preparation for the show tonight, and it is a brilliant song. It really is. It's yeah, it's overplayed, but I don't hear it that much at all anymore because I really don't listen to popular radio, so I don't hear it.
I second that.
Yeah, I wanted to bring one thing up. You brought up Stairway to Heaven. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No problem.
it was funny because when I used to go roller skating back in the 80s,
There we
to
go.
roller rink. They used to have like rock night there, and they used to play like it was in the 80s, but they play a lot of 70s rock or whatever. It was pretty cool. At the end of the night, they'd always play Stairway to Heaven was like the last song. Like when that song was on the night, they're going to close up after that or whatever. I just remember I want to say it was Friday night, or it was it must have been Friday night. Every Friday night for probably like a year or something, I heard that song. It always reminded me like the night's going to end, and I don't know. It's just funny to think about those times in the 80s when you used to, have roller rinks or going to the bowling alley or something like that, but those are just like the normal things that like a lot of the stoners and metal people and everyone that was kind of a outcast somehow used to go to the roller rink. Even if we didn't roller rink, we just hang out there. A lot of my friends, I'd watch my friends smoke cigarettes, or we just talk about stuff or whatever with our denim jackets on and stuff. It just brought back a memory I had to bring up.
Yeah. It's so they play Stairway to Heaven. That was for a couple skaters only.
Yeah. Yeah, they would have They would have
Let's get the couple skaters on the floor. Yeah. Yeah. And so I'd say my number one song on the album is When the Levee Breaks. It's just a great song, and like you guys were saying, the drums is the driving factor of that song, which the Beastie Boys would rip that off some years later on one of their songs, the License to Ill album. But so every time I hear that on, I almost hear the Beastie Boys song coming into it because I've heard it so many times over the years. But yeah, that would be my three picks from the album. And like I said, it's a great album overall, and definitely one of the greatest of all time, and from one of the greatest bands of all time.
For sure. So I guess it's my turn to give my picks, and I absolutely love. I mean, of course, if you're going to put a gun to your head, you might say rock and roll, Black Dog, and Stairway to Heaven, of course, because they were the hits. No matter how many times we had to be, like stuck at work somewhere, so you have to hear those songs so much it was just kind of like But now, like you said, like Tony said, if you stop listening to regular radio for years, like a lot of us have, whereas we've got albums to listen to and new releases that we're listening to and whatever else, when you hear this stuff again, you don't find it to be played out anymore. You're kind of unplayed out. At least I am. And I mean, I'm going to go with number 3 from me. I absolutely love, and a couple other people have mentioned it too, the Battle of Evermore. It's just like that whole spacey kind of like epic, I don't know, it's not epic, but it's spacey, and it's just atmospheric, and I love it. And how the Queen of Light, the lyrics, it took her bow and then she turned to go, the Prince of Peace embraced the gloom and walked the night alone. And it's just such great lyrics. And of course, Robert Plant, one of the best frontmen from back then. I think a lot of those guys that me and I was talking about from high school, and so were John, as a lot of the kids tried to emulate Robert probably while they were outside smoking that cigarette. Not everybody had a dove in one hand like Robert, but like that classic poster I had in my room in the 70s. I still have one hanging up in the back of the shop that I found. But and I'm going to completely disagree with Tony Dio for my number 2. I love Four Sticks. I just, with that
I don't hate it, but it's just not.
It's pretty damn aggressive, heavy song, I think. and it's probably one of the songs that's kind of overlooked on this album. But so I'm gonna go with that for number 2, and I don't know. I'm gonna say "Stairway to Heaven's" the number 1 song. I just that ending part, and we all, when you were a young kid and you first were exposed to this band, and the whole song's great, but then it builds up to the end where they kick down to the wind down the road, and "Shadows Taller Than Our Soul," that was a lady we all know, and it's just like this. It's like one of the most epic songs ever, and so
Break out the air guitar.
yeah, Guitar Hero probably had that on or
The
something.
air
I
guitar.
don't even know.
I don't say you just break out the air guitar,
Yeah, for sure. So Led Zeppelin, and I'm gonna give that album a 10 out of 10. I don't know how I couldn't. That's one of the Desert Island albums, or Deserted Island, or whatever we talk about. I'd say, of course, there's a couple of those from Led Zeppelin out there, but of course, that's one of the best ones. So now we're gonna hop over to another English band, a couple towns over, I guess, or cities, whatever. The Master of Realities, the 3rd studio album by the English rock band Black Sabbath, in case you didn't know. It's released on July 21st, 1971 on Vertigo, regarded by some critics as the foundation of doom metal, stoner rock, and sludge metal. It peaked at number 5 on the UK album charts and number 8 on the US Billboard. Was negatively received by critics on release. The album is now considered one of the greatest heavy metal albums of all time, and it's been certified double platinum after having sold over 2 million copies. I don't know if that's true. I was trying to reach out and see how many million copies, or how many copies this album's actually sold from 1971 to now. I was thinking it should be more than 2 million.
Has to be more than 2 million.
Has to be, right? Because what
even
the
just in the
Zeppelin one was
States,
like.
more than that.
You would think so, yeah, for sure. So that's probably some fake news I got here. Sorry, guys. But The Master of Reality was recorded at Island Studios in London in February to April of 71. The album was produced by Roger Bain, who also produced Black Sabbath's previous 2 albums, with future Judas Priest producer Tom Allom handling the engineering. This was to be Bain's final collaboration with Black Sabbath, as guitarist Tony Iommi took over production duties for the band's next several albums. Drummer Bill Ward explained previously, "We didn't have a clue what to do in the studio. We relied heavily on Roger. But this time we were a lot more together and understood what was involved, and were more opinionated about how things should be done." Here's a little note I found on the internet about Sweetleaf. Some people may know. During the album's recording sessions, Osbourne brought Iommi a large joint, which caused the guitarist to cough uncontrollably. Iommi was recording acoustic guitar parts in the time, and his coughing fit was captured on tape. And a fragment of Iommi's coughing was later added to the producer Bain as the intro to Sweetleaf. So, little story about that. The song was also admittedly an ode to marijuana use, of course, duh. And Iommi recalls, we all played Sweetleaf while stoned. In an interview with Guitar World in 2001, Butler recalled, "I do remember writing Sweetleaf in the studio." So, and they had these little cigarettes called Sweet Afton, which you could only get in Ireland. And we were going, what could we write about? And we took out the cigarette packet, and as we opened it, on the lid, it says "the sweetest leaf that gives you taste." And we were like, Sweetleaf. So the quintessential stoner anthem is that song, of course. And let's see, what else do I have to say about that? I guess that's what I guess we can go with that. And Black Sabbath, Master of Realities. Ralph, let's throw the ball over to you and let's talk about it.
All right. Well,
I got a little
you guys talking about like growing up in the different cliques and stuff. In the 80s, we had our metal clique, and then there was like the Deadhead clique.
Sure.
And we had a friend that his parents used to let us go over there and party all the time. So like you would just show up there on a Friday or Saturday, and there was always people hanging out, drinking and partying. We were like real young, but the problem is he was the Deadhead, and so he controlled the music there. So the metalheads, we used to complain and stuff, and we wouldn't get much of our stuff played. But when he would play like a Zeppelin, then we'd go, okay, we'd rather hear Zeppelin than hear the Dead. So we were happy when a Zeppelin or Hendrix or the Doors even. But one of the things that came on was Sweet Leaf, like you were just talking about. Once that came on, that was something we all agreed on, and that's something. And that's my number 3 from the album. And this was really hard to pick 3 songs off of this album because it's one of my all-time favorite albums and one of my favorite Sabbath albums. So my number 1 and 2 have gone back and forth all day about. I thought for sure it would be After Forever would be my favorite song, but Children of the Grave is my favorite song on the album. Like, I mean, it just squeaks by, but man, both of them are so great. I love this album, and this is definitely the time machine tour to go see back then, you know. And just there's nothing much more I could say. I give it a perfect 10. I mean, Solitude was the one song that was a little bit weak on it, but Lord of this World, Into the Void. I mean, you could go talk about this album forever. It's such a great album, and that's pretty much it for it, you know.
In Solitude, even though it could be the weakest track on the album, it's still a great track, and it fits completely in that 34 minutes of music.
That's why it still gets a 10, you know, it still gets a 10 for me.
For sure. Is that moody part as you're listening to the album where it kind of just dulls down, and you know, great stuff.
Every other song is so great and it's so heavy. The riffs are just unbelievable. Bill Ward's drumming is unbelievable. This album, he's so important on this album. But everybody's perfect on this album, and it's one of the best albums ever.
For sure. All right, Mr. McEntee.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, Masters of Reality is a ridiculously groundbreaking album for anybody into metal, any kind of metal almost, especially, you know, stoner stuff and death metal and every kind of metal. There's I don't think any metal band who isn't like at least slightly influenced by this album, you might want to, you know, not buy their album because it's such an important album. I mean, the first you know, 3 albums by Sabbath are all groundbreaking, but it was just incredible that they were able to put such a strong 3rd album that pushed things even further than the first 2, which were totally groundbreaking at the time. I mean, well, I wasn't aware of it at the time. I probably didn't hear Sweet Leaf or any of these songs until the late 70s of like my friend. I used to have a friend that his brother had a bunch of records, and my friend let me borrow his brother's records, and his brother probably never knew where those records went. I just ended up with them. He never asked for them back, and I just kept them. So I have like original copies of those that I just, I guess I unofficially stole, I guess. But anyway,
sorry, friend.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, as far as this album goes, Ralph's right. There is, it's pretty much a perfect album. I love every song off the album. The music on this album personally just means so much to me because part of what I do with my musical career is owed to this album. Is one of the albums that was like, you know, Incantation wouldn't be Incantation if Black Sabbath didn't exist. I mean, I remember listening to a lot of these songs off of Masters of Reality around the time I was getting guitar lessons, and my guitar teacher never understood how I could like Black Sabbath so much. He was like a big Zeppelin head, and I like Zeppelin too, but you know, Black Sabbath was kind of like my Zeppelin or whatever for him. Like I listened to Black Sabbath every single day, multiple albums, multiple times a day, and especially, you know, in my early years, listening to this album was, you know, one of my favorites. I mean, I've learned to really like their whole discography mostly, but this album, there's no doubt that, I mean, the amount of bands that came from this out, you know, influenced by this album is just ridiculous. But Um, I picking. It's hard to pick 3 songs off this album because it's such a damn strong album.
You can pick 5 if you want. How's
Uh,
that?
can I pick
No.
8?
Pick 8.
Um,
Pick every one of them.
but I think I think if I really try, it's impossible because I was gonna pick my number 3 is Into the Void. I mean, that's such a
Yeah.
good song and such it's just inspiring. I mean, I heard nothing like that song when I heard that song. Like there was things just didn't exist. I mean, that type of song didn't exist in my for me. Um you know, I usually don't like picking the one of the most popular ones, Sweet Leaf, but I mean, man, that is an amazing song. The way that comes in and the heaviness of the riff. And I don't know if it's my I mean, if I'm being honest, I don't know what my number 3 and 2 is. And I just know that if I had to pick a number 1 on the album, even though it's ridiculous because it's also one of their most popular songs, but Children of the Grave on here is so good. I mean,
Awesome.
when I first heard that, it was just so evil, and just the rumble of the bass and the drums and the heaviness of the guitars, and then that evil holding out of the notes at the end that Tony Iommi does. I mean, being a young metalhead, hearing that for the first time, it was just like, that was some dark, evil shit. So yeah, I mean, I honestly, the whole album, I like the whole album. I think the whole album is,
Oh, yeah.
it's pretty much perfect. I mean, it's Sabbath is a very difficult band for me to dissect what albums I like the best, what songs I like the best, but just looking at this album and the songs on here, I was listening to it, a couple times to prepare for the show, and man, I just couldn't choose. But just when I heard, Children of the Grave, I was like, you know, I would any other band that had a song that was as popular as Children of the Grave, I'd be like, this is so overplayed and so just like uninteresting. But when you hear that dun 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 dun, dun, you just like you have to love it. I mean, it's everything that is metal. I
Gallop,
mean,
right? That gallop.
yeah, that gallop. It
And
just
that's what, and like we got to hear that later on with Maiden. Like it kind of came, like that song kind of started that a little bit, right?
yeah. It's one of well, it's one of the first songs that really emphasized that gallop. I mean, I think they've had it a few other parts before that, but this was the time when that gallop was really driving the song. And yeah, and it must have influenced.
Oh,
I mean, I'm sure it influenced every single new wave of British heavy metal band at that time. I mean,
yeah.
and like I said, for myself as a death metal fan or a metal fan growing into a death metal fan, there was just no way that this album in Black Sabbath wasn't going to be a part of the DNA of what I play, personally. And I mean, the amount of times I remember listening to this album on the way to practice, inspiring me, or being with the band, listening to this album is I can't even count how many times I've listened to this album. I mean, it's thousands and thousands of times we've listened to this album. I mean, it's just in my DNA. But it's one of those albums. Even though I sometimes bitch about the early albums being overplayed and stuff like that, put them on and I change my mind. Put them on and I think they're the greatest album
I
ever.
think that's all because maybe we put them on a shelf for a few years and we haven't been surrounded by, like, not that this album got a lot of rock radio. Sweet Leaf does, but I agree with you. Like, maybe you haven't listened to it in a few years either, because before the pandemic, you're on tour, you're recording, you're listening to new stuff from other bands that are coming out. But when you hear this, it's kind of like coming home, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is pretty much where a lot of heavy metal really started. I mean, a lot of people could say that heavy metal started with the first album, Black Sabbath or Paranoid. But I think this one put it more together as it's actually metal more. It's rock metal. The other ones were just really heavy rock and a lot of more jazz and a lot of more blues to it. This one is more metal, I think, of an album. It's like the first one that was actually reminiscent of what metal would be, like the seeds, the defined seeds, not just the heaviness of it, but these, like I said, Children of the Grave, Sweet Leaf, Into the Void, Lord of This World, all those songs have parts that spawned other bands' careers. Really, Black Sabbath should be making a lot more money off royalties from all the bands that rip off this album parts or influenced by these album parts, because it's just, you hear it all the time, especially in stoner rock or stoner metal and stuff like that. Sometimes it's like ridiculous. You're just like, come on, dude. You're just basically
And
like,
there's a ton of that going on now. Of course, I like that scene a lot, but there's a lot. How many? And I've interviewed some bands that like total influence Mass Reality.
yeah.
That's what started all that.
I mean, it's cool that they're doing it, but at the same time, it's like, okay, I know you're stoned and maybe you don't have the time to really think of your own riffs, but you don't have to take them from Sabbath. At least
I haven't smoked since last winter, and doing this show between Zeppelin 4 and this, I'm tempted. I think I'm going to at least smoke some CBD tonight when I get done here.
But yeah, my real top 3 is all 8.
Cool. And what do you get? And you're giving us a 10?
Yeah, it's a 10.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Or I would give it higher than 10, but
11.
Say 10. Yeah, it's like Spinal Tap.
It popped. It was like the thermometer got to the top and it busted it.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Cool, man. And I'll make one mention before we move over to Tony. Over the years, of course, with the store and concerts and running everything, I mean, Black Sabbath is a band that you could put on for any kind of after party. Like if it's a death metal show, death metal people love it. Even if it's like a hardcore show, you can put this on. If it's a freaking regular metal show or classic rock. We were talking about the coalition with like Grateful Dead and stuff like that. I know many Deadheads, but they like Sabbath. So Sabbath can cross over to a Grateful Dead party, a death metal party. They're just universal with likes. I mean, if you don't like
that reminds me of a quick funny story. It's not to do with Masters of Reality, but my favorite song, probably in 1989, 90, my favorite song was the Warning off the first album. And my girlfriend at the time put it on, like she made like a mixtape for like this party and stuff that we were having. It was like a cookout party thing, only a couple of friends. And Black Sabbath, The Warning went on, and it was the most awkward situation ever, because it's kind of like the least friendly party song ever, because half of it's a solo. The whole vibe of it was so dark, and everything was kind of like more upbeat. So I kind of made the party very awkward. Everyone's just like, what the hell are you playing? But I felt like I was happy to hear it, but at the same time I was like, maybe I should have picked a better song than, maybe something a little more user friendly. But I agree with you though, that when it comes to like, more of a stoner thing, or like the Grateful Dead or the Zeppelin crowd, they could still listen to these early Sabbath albums, and it kind of fits right in that
or
vibe,
death metal crowd, right?
Yeah.
We're all hanging out at an Incantation show or Chrysian show, and everybody gets off stage. You go in the back, or you go to somebody's house, and but on Sabbath, it's a perfect thing to put on, right?
Yeah. I mean, pretty much if you don't like Sabbath, I mean, you shouldn't be at the party anyway.
Now go home.
Yeah, exactly.
Here comes Mr. Dio. Speaking of Sabbath and Dio, we're not talking about Dio Sabbath now, but we're talking about Ozzy Sabbath.
Dio Sabbath's actually what got me into Black Sabbath originally. First,
we're going to talk about that next week's episode. So keep that.
So I had, got into all the stuff later, and I started picking up all the albums. And we're talking about the heaviness of Master Reality versus the first two. it seems like I read somewhere that Iommi tuned in standard on the first two albums, and he didn't start drop tuning until Master Reality, I think was the album.
I think
You're
you're right.
correct with that. Yeah.
Maybe to
Correct,
C
yeah.
or something like that. He
Yes,
started
C.
drop tuning. So he's got that from the depths of hell sound like no other at that time, you know.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a great album overall. Like you guys are saying, it's not a bad song on it. I think you can look at Ralph's hat there, and I have the CD here. I think that's my favorite Black Sabbath logo.
The
purple
logo.
It's kind of psychedelic looking, but
Yeah.
the purple logo.
Yeah, it fits.
Yeah, it's really cool. And so if I got to pick some songs off of this, I think number 3, I would probably go with After Forever. It's a really neat song. Kind of unique for Sabbath is the lyrics. I kind of have a religious type aspect to them. If you read the lyrics, I remember people saying back in the day Black Sabbath were devil worshippers, and I was like, well, maybe you need to listen, read the lyrics to After Forever, because Geezer Butler wrote that, and I think I don't know what the story was behind that, but I know there's been a couple of Christian metal bands like Striper and Deliverance that have both done covers of that song on their album.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Me
And,
neither.
but from there, another great one, Lord of This World. It's a great riff, great opening riff on that song. It's just so dark. Just a cool song in general. Kind of the wild card on that album. And then my favorite song is going to be Into the Void. I mean, that Iommi is the riff master, and he's got 3 solid riffs in that one song. I mean, you get that first riff and you start kind of like groove into it, and it just stops and goes into another great riff, So it's just a great song, and it's always been one of my favorite Black Sabbath songs, period. I remember even seeing a video once with Tony Martin doing it, and he did a great job on it. So that was really cool.
I just don't think the riffs that they came up with on this album just didn't exist. I mean, maybe there's something I don't know about, but I never heard any of these style riffs before this. Like, you can't say, to me at least, I can't go back and listen to anything and say this is where they got this from, because these riffs are like unique, but they're obvious, but they're unique, but I didn't hear them done before. That's amazing.
I don't really think they were.
Yeah.
But this album gets a 10 for sure.
Got it. And I'm going to echo some of the stuff you said. I guess my number 3 song on this album tonight is going to be Into the Void. That whole in a rocket engine burning fuel. I can't sing it good, but burning fuel so fast up into the night sky, they blast, and it was just. And when you saw this song, this was a staple on their live set for years, even in the final days of the Sabbath reunion and the farewell tours. Just getting up into that crowd and everybody just grooving, it was like
good headbanger.
It was almost like groove. It was like a groove metal. Maybe they invented groove metal too. A little bit of that song. You know what I mean?
It does have a groove to it. That's for sure.
Pollution kills the air, the land and sea. Man prepares to meet his destiny. Yeah. So, and then Children of the Grave is probably, I don't know. None of this is in particular order, but Children of the Grave, and John kind of explained it all very well so far. Children of the Grave, that was when you were a kid, like when I was 15 or whatever, listening to this album in a room that looked exactly like this. Probably snuck a beer out of the refrigerator for my dad and whatever else, and I'm sitting in a room, and this is just like, just overwhelming the senses that song was, and how in the end it has that whisper like Children of the Grave.
Mm-hmm.
If you had the headphones on, it was just perfect. But and then I'm gonna go with After Forever. I mean, Sweet Leaf could be my favorite song too, but I was kind of going against the grain a little bit. But After Forever, I love the lyrics from that, especially I have this one chorus in my head a lot lately. Is your mind so small that you have to fall in with the pack wherever they run? Will you still sneer when death is near? And you say that you may as well worship the sun. I just love that because you talk about everyone that's arguing now about this and that and in the world. I'm like, everyone's just got to run with this pack. Oh, it was on this channel. Oh, it's on that channel. You have to believe what they say. It's just like open your mind and look at everything. Look at everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's not even what the song's about, but it's more about religion. Like you want to see the Pope on the end of a rope, you know. I mean, this is just a great album, and I'm not going to compare either album, but you can't really compare it. And I really all day, and even before we started taping tonight, I almost said, "Hey, let's do Zeppelin, and I'll send you another Zoom, and we'll do it separate." Which I think we probably look back should have maybe done, had them both in their own separate category. But we'll move on forward with that. I hope everyone enjoyed this episode, and we had the Fantastic Four tonight, I guess we're calling it, but had about 9 people earlier today, but it's holiday season. Everybody's busy. Next week on the channel, we're going to have an interview with Johnny Z, I was just told, that Steve Levin is putting together on Monday evening. And
Awesome.
next Wednesday, we plan on visiting another roundtable for the 40th anniversary of 2 albums from 1981. And also in the Ozzy and Sabbath realm, we're going to pit Ozzy's Diary of a Madman. And then we're going to talk about Mob Rules. And at that time, that was a competing factor because you had your Black Sabbath camp and you had Ozzy getting kicked out and Ozzy kind of starting from ground up with Blizzard of Oz. And that was the second album, of course, with Randy Rhoads, and of course, one of Sabbath's best albums too. So I think that should be an interesting one for us to tackle. And hopefully everyone can make it next Wednesday on this panel and grab a couple other folks to hang out. So hope everyone liked the channel, the show tonight. If you like the channel, please hit subscribe. It'll let you know when we put something new out, and mention what your favorite songs are from the Zeppelin album and the Black Sabbath album, or what ones you like better. And John's gone on tour soon, so Incantation's going to Mexico. So if anybody's watching from Mexico, our friends down there, please go check them out. Right, it's coming up soon, right, John?
Yeah, coming up next month. I think what I leave on for I don't know, first show's like 15th or 16th or something like that. I think 16th.
Okay.
And yeah, we're super stoked, finally getting back on the road playing some freaking metal. So we're really psyched. It's crazy because Mexico is the last place we played before the pandemic, and now the first place we're going back to.
Isn't that crazy?
But to be fair, Mexico's always been kind of a great place for us. They just seem to really like their heavy, over the top, ridiculously brutal death metal, and it's just we're super stoked about it. And then of course we have the Nile tour coming up that we're doing too, which is going to be awesome in February.
February, yeah, it's coming.
Yeah, and then besides that, doing that fest that I talked about last time a little bit. It's the Caroline Chainsaw Massacre, and Chainsaw Massacre.
Ralph has to go to that.
Yeah, and hopefully he does. We're just trying to work out some stuff. We're hopefully going to have some announcements on more added bands and some more guests for that pretty soon. So yeah, I'm really excited about it.
It seems like Mexico's got stuff going on because I know that I follow, of course, we're friends with the brothers at Crizzy in there, and they had just played Mexico. I think
they played TJ.
Weekend.
Yeah, there was a fest in TJ. It was they played, and I think Hyrax played. I don't know all the bands that play that one.
Nervosa was there.
Was it the same fest? Yeah, Nervosa was there too. Then
flew in from not no longer from Brazil, but now Preca's and they're all in Europe now. So
yeah.
As I saw pictures of Mia and stuff she had a sombrero on, and
did she do the Mexican hat dance?
She may have, but I wasn't there, so we only saw a photo. I'm sure there was some fun involved with that crew,
Yeah, that's awesome.
Cool. So I guess that wraps up this episode, guys. And thanks for giving your time to the channel. And I hope all the viewers out there enjoyed it. And you guys in United States, enjoy your holiday weekend. Happy Turkey Day.
Yeah. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah.